time to just kind of settle in here.
I'm always nervous to start talking.
That's good.
Does that sound loud?
No, no, it's good.
It's good.
Okay. All right, so. So let's settle ourselves here. Like Rinpoche was talking about one of Monday or Tuesday night. He said, you know, he's talking about the helpfulness of mindfulness, which our society is certainly latched on to. And so one way to awaken mindfulness, really, is to bring our minds to the present. And so an easy way to do that is to bring your attention to your body sitting here. You know, notice the sensation of the chair against your legs, the temperature of the room against your skin. The sounds of others, the sound of the air-conditioned fan. And by bringing your attention to your body in this way, you naturally let go of, reminiscing about the busyness of getting here or your planning for later. So just take a moment to scan your body, looking for any spots of tension or just checking in with it, see how it's doing. And then find the sensation of the breath at the tip of your nose as it enters and exits the body. And just use that sensation as an anchor for your mind, allowing the mind to just settle down. Thoughts will still arise, but they can drop to the background by using the breath as an anchor. If you find your mind has traveled off following one of your thoughts, just let the thought breath arise, bringing your attention back to that sensation of the breath. And try to remember the reason you came this morning. And using that reason, generate a positive motivation or a positive intention. The more intentional we are with our time, the better we make use of our time. So if you're new, it can be as simple as listening with curiosity, with an open mind. And then just combine it with the wish that it be of some benefit, not only for your own mind, but it ripples out to benefit others. And once again, bring your attention to your body sitting here, your awareness that there are others around you. And then just gently open your eyes. And we'll recite the 4 measurables in this gold book. Page 34. So prayers in Buddhism are, and maybe in all traditions, are like wishes. But from that wish can come an aspiration to make whatever that wish is become actualized. So the 4 immeasurables is about having a wish to generate 4 measurable minds of love and compassion and joy and equanimity. In this chord. Okay. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So this verse can actually, I can do an entire meditation from this verse. So, because these are the types of attitudes we're trying to, according to Buddhism, these are the kinds of minds that directly impact our happiness and reduce our suffering. That the more we're focused on the state of others, instead of focusing on our own worries, our own suffering, our own pain, our own lack of something, if we focus on how are others doing, how can I be of help, how can I rejoice in the happiness they have, those kinds of minds, those right away can reduce our suffering just by the focus, just by not being caught up in whatever's going on for us. And what do we have the most habit energy with as far as minds go? What was Rinpoche, if any of y'all were lucky enough like I was to hear Rinpoche talk this week? Past and future, but what in particular? obviously it didn't resonate with Ralph. So,
Ourselves.
well, in our negative self-talk, that we have a tendency not just to have negative self-talk about ourselves, which is a large part of it, but we also tend to focus on the negative period. Just like whatever's happening, we tend to zero in on what's wrong with this picture, as opposed to, how can I help with this picture? Or what's right with this picture? And so that habit, I thought this was really interesting. Nancy Rinpoche said he really thought that this habit of the negative mind, it was the main obstacle to positive self-reflection. Because it's not just the habit of talking badly about ourselves, to ourselves, but also by reinforcing this habit of focusing on the negative all the time means that it's very difficult for us to even use the mental space that we have to take the time to reflect positively about ourselves because of the habit of negative thought, just that habit, whether it's about ourselves or others. It just means we have the habit of looking for the bad. And that, I love this. Rinpoche actually said he thought that, the Buddha taught that we all have Buddha nature. We all have the capacity to become a Buddha. And we know this because we all have love and compassion. They're just in limited forms. But the fact that we have them at all, that once we remove the obstacles that are creating these false limits, we have the same capacity for a loving mind as a Buddha. And he felt that we were 99% there. Not a lot of believers in the room.
I think he said he thought he was 99.
No. I listened to it again. No, he said he felt ordinary sentient beings were the difference between us and enlightened beings was 1%.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, funny that. I mean, this is what we do, right? We don't, yes. We just create the story as we're going along. And he felt that part of this obstacle, that what was holding back that 1% was our inability, or not inability, because that's not correct, our habit of thinking it's not possible. If we just let go of that habit, that, it's not like then right away we'd be Buddha. No, we'd have to do, do some work. But that most of what our difficulty in becoming awakened or enlightened is this resistance to that possibility. I thought that was very interesting. It's just an interesting way to look at it. And so I've been thinking about how do we experiment with that idea, just for kicks and giggles. And so a friend of mine was telling me about an experience she had this week where, let me remember it. Where she just felt for a moment, like her heart just sort of cracked open to where she could really feel the compassion for everyone who's ever felt in this particular way. Just that, where there just was no barriers, and it was just in that, just for this moment. And I thought, well, that's the glimpse, that you have the capacity, that it is present. It is, that every now and then we're free of those limits. And that if we allow ourselves to rejoice in those moments, to really recognize, whoa, this is the power of my mind and heart being the same word, you know, then perhaps we'd get more confidence that we really are capable of transforming our mind in the direction we want to go. You know, and that most of the transformation comes from using, you know, kind of reasoning that say the limits that we put on ourselves are on faulty ground. You know, I mean, most of the time I know my limits are just sort of start with a very vague, I can't. There's no real logic to it. It's just sort of a belief. Oh, I can't do that. I'll never be able to do that. There's not actually any foundation for it other than this, like Rinpoche was saying, this negative habit of thought. And I think there's a little bit of, in our culture perhaps, a belief that it is arrogant to think that you can. That you know, that there are no limits to your mind. And what the Buddha's saying is, because the Buddha's not for arrogance, I mean, you know, or for false pride, or afflicted pride, or any of those kinds of inflated minds. But it's about the fact that just look at your good qualities, look at your capacity, and from there, let's break down the obstacles to it being, because, you know, what stops our capacity for compassion, for example?
Negative thoughts
About
ourselves.
how about what stops your compassion for Hitler?
Hatred.
Hatred's a thought.
Blame.
Blame that others aren't deserving, which comes probably from our idea that we aren't deserving. You know, we just generalized it. So that there are some people who are deserving of compassion and some people who aren't. And the Buddha said, all people, you know, are deserving. That there is sort of no deserving. All actions are not equal. You know, so it's not saying that there aren't actions that are despicable, you know, that aren't something that needs to stop. It's just that our attitude towards the person committing those deeds does not have to be limited. And this partly comes from the Buddhist teaching that our minds are beginningless and endless. So, no one goes away forever. Or actually, no one goes away at all. So, you know, it's like, this was one of the motivating factors for me to correct my relationship with my father. Was that if I didn't do a better job now, then I'm just going to meet this relationship again in the future. So whether you buy into that or not, we do have a tendency, you know, we can see even in one life that we repeat, you know, dynamics with people. You know, that we don't just, it's not like every person that comes into our lives that the relationship evolves fresh. You know, we bring our habits to it. And so we want to be very aware of those habits. So I just thought it was interesting that Rinpoche said that, you know, we really should look at just what we think limits us, you know, and try to look at that and try to really interrupt this negative mind all the time. Because who knows what will arise if we don't focus on the negative. I mean, he didn't say that, but I'm saying that. So, what do y'all think?
I think that what I really got from this message, because of where I am or was when listening, was the notion that fear is horribly limiting. And,
Yes.
that compassion, loving kindness is the antidote to that as well. Particularly, I remember him saying that devotion and fear, or loving kindness and fear, cannot exist in the same
Coexist.
space.
Yeah. So this is an interesting idea. So the first night we talked a lot about fear. And some of this relates to the negative mind. Some of it is sort of just a second topic. But that a lot of our negative mind arises out of fear. So self-doubt. Even, he said, even that, it wasn't really talking about the fear that arises when we're in danger, when we're in actual danger, as opposed to the fear that arises when we may think we're in danger, or we may, the fears that arise with other stuff, not something like there's a tiger in the room. So, that these fears arise basically from our self-grasping, and then there's a negative view in there. So what are examples of the negative view?
Let's discuss one, self-doubt.
Self-doubt is one.
Judgment.
Judgment.
Part of the judgment, telling somebody they always do something or they never do something.
Especially and we often do that to ourselves. We have fear because we feel like we can't handle it, or we can't do it, or we won't get what we need, or we won't get what we want. I mean, there's all this, it comes from, a self-oriented perspective. I'm sorry.
I said criticism.
And criticism. Or destructive criticism. As opposed to helpful hints. We had to reframe everything. So, but our fear, he told some lovely stories that aren't lovely, but they're very useful stories. He was talking about two monks who were escaping from Tibet in 59, and I think it was in 59, and they got to a gorge, and so they, you have, I don't know, do gorges always have rivers? Because I don't think this one had a river. Anyway, but like one side was like a cliff face kind of thing, and one side had a military camp. So, talk about your rock in a hard place. So they realized they couldn't go by the military base. That was just way too dangerous. So they were going to have to go to the other side and basically rock climb, climb up this vertical space. And as they were climbing up this vertical space, they saw a guard on the top of the face. And so they just, what do you do? You have to take the risk on the, with the one person as opposed to the whole base. So that's what they decided to do, was to keep climbing. And then when they got close enough, they realized it was a boulder, not a guard at all. And then just that, that relief, that giggly relief that comes over you when you realize your fear is totally misplaced. But that all the way up that climb, their fear had produced this illusion. And they 100%, they saw the boulder move, walk back and forth, that kind of thing. So this is one of the things that's worth looking at what fear does to our mind, how it creates a story, and we completely fall for it. And it's not based on anything except what our fear of what might be happening, or what may happen in the future. So we really need to see how that impacts our body, speech, and mind. Because we're, even though we're not making such a journey, like trying to escape from Tibet, we have a lot of fear. It comes up a lot that people have behind this or that. They have anxiety, there's some element of fear. And it's just a matter of degree. Whether it's some huge, fear like I'm sure these men had as they were climbing that cliff face, or just that fear that somehow this is not going to work out kind of fear. in whatever situation it is. Yeah, Richard.
Why do you think people chase after fear? Like, they've got all these crazy sports these days.
Oh, the extreme sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved scary movies as a child.
But,
Yeah. Adrenaline.
That adrenaline
it's
rush.
like, yeah, no, and I know, I've liked it too, going on roller coasters and stuff
Mhm.
in the past, but
I think we're addicted to adrenaline. That's my theory. The Buddha didn't say so. That's just my theory. Don't quote me that Tenryun said, the Buddha said. But I do think we're very attached to physical sensations. And so some people like the feel of adrenaline.
okay.
You know, other people like different kinds of feelings.
Is that fear you're talking about?
The adrenaline?
The fear of sports and that kind, isn't there different kinds of fear?
Yeah, I don't,
I didn't think you were addressing that kind of fear.
Yeah.
well, that's in there. That's one of the fear, but that's one of those things where some people are attracted to. They like to feel on the edge of things. So it's different.
But it's a different fear.
It's a different basis, perhaps. But it's probably the same physical response.
Well, you know what, it's as if there's not an aversion, like most people have an aversion to fear and some people have an attachment to it.
Yeah, and they're both kinds of attachment. So the fear that is an aversion is the attachment to being separated from it. The fear that is attachment is wanting to have more of that. But they're both types of attachment. Yeah.
I think when you talk about fear in professional sports, I played hockey for the Philadelphia Flyers, and the fear of control, of not being in control, is the fear of the adrenaline rush. So I think a lot of people get hooked on that. They're scared, but they think they control it, but they know in their mind they don't control it, so they want to live on that edge, they want to live on that glass walkway over the Grand Canyon. If anybody's been there, it's phenomenal. You're fearful, but I'm in control. I can take baby steps. So I think that's what it is. We all have that somewhere in a room in our mind.
Well, a lot of people have.
Yes. And I think that's what it is. So we all have that little edge. I'm gonna go through this yellow light, and everything's gonna
I'll
be
take
okay.
the risk.
I'll take the risk I'll be okay. It's gonna be all right on the other side of the light. So I think that's what happens with a lot of us.
And I think it just goes deeper than that. I think that the reason why we get attracted to that, probably, because I think this issue of control, that sense of feeling like I can control danger, because we don't like to feel helpless. And so anything that proves to us that we're not, that we actually can, handle whatever comes up, that, fear doesn't even stop me, kind of thing, gives us an illusion that nothing bad will happen to us, which of course isn't true, because fear doesn't prevent anything. Yeah.
To piggyback on that example, I look at that more as a desire for experience or adventure.
Yeah, it's an
But-
attachment to sensation.
Yeah. The fear I'm thinking about is debilitating is fear of heights, the irrational thing.
Some people would find that same thing with playing hockey.
Oh, hockey, yeah.
But my point is, it's relative. That's not the point. The point isn't what happens to make you afraid. It's that we are very attracted to physical sensation. And the ones that we like, whether it's adrenaline based or pleasure based, or if you see adrenaline as pleasure, who knows? But that we get hooked on going from sensation to sensation, because we think happiness is there. We think this is the same thing. It's really no different. It's just it has a very pronounced physiological component. But it's the same kind of thing that drives us to make sure we haven't run out of our coffee or tea so that we can have it first thing in the morning when we wake up. and that if you smoke, that you have your carton of cigarettes, or that you know, that if you're, whatever it is, you know, and then you make sure you have the stuff you want for lunch, or that, you know, the restaurant is open on a Monday, or, you know, whatever. We spend our whole day making sure it's crafted according to what we like, you know, as best we can. Now, we're not 2-year-olds, so we're capable of tolerating, you know, from time to time when that's not going to work out exactly like we hoped, you know. But, you know, we think that the happiness depends on this external experience of getting what you want, getting what you need, having the relationships you like, you know, having the work you enjoy. You know, we just kind of go through that because we think our happiness is dependent on this external thing, which is part of what is the basis for fear. If you think, ooh, I might not get it, I might not deserve it, I might not, whatever, just continue on with the I might be alone for the rest of my life. Yeah.
So this idea of fearing to lose what you have or not getting what you want, you know, and this idea that I would be happier if all these pieces were in place the way I would like to have them in place. But in contrast to that, not having that, you're kind of sitting there with the, well, I anyway, myself, a little sense of an abyss there. And, you know,
And again, it's because we think those things have to fill that abyss. You know, so this is why we get caught. We kind of, you know, we go, well, I know how it feels when I'm not getting anything I need, you know, versus I know how I feel when I do get everything I want. You know, notice I use need in one case. So, yes.
I saw a YouTube video of Rinpoche recently, and he said, meditation guarantees you'll never be bored. And I like that, because sometimes you'll be sitting there going, oh, there's nothing to do. Oh, I know, I just don't feel right, you know. But
if you commit to meditation,
Yeah.
you are never without something to do.
yeah,
You never have to wait again. It's a very cool thing. You know, it really is. It's this recognizing we always have an object for the mind to explore, and it's our own mind.
And it's almost like when you get rid of that puzzle that you mentioned, there's a certain amount of freedom in that, is you're able to move forward without thinking about all of that.
Well, this is why when you start a meditation, it's recommended that you start by settling your mind. You know, that you try, and the way to settle your mind is to come to the present. Because chasing after our memories or chasing after our future keeps us scattered. Whereas if we just notice what's happening now, that helps us settle down. Now, of course, if what's happening now is we're running away from a tiger, that doesn't necessarily apply. But it does mean you'll really be sharp on noticing escape routes because you'll be focused. So if you get really skilled at the ability to pay attention to what's happening now, you have a much greater, you know, skill at taking care of whatever's happening now. Whereas if you're distracted, you know, you're kind of lucky if you fall onto something that fits this situation, you know. And this often happens when we've been hooked by something, you know, and the sources of our hooks are often things like, my tire went flat this morning, and then we spend the rest of the day thinking about how inconvenient that is, you know, or we, you know, I don't know, I can't think of anything today. I usually have just a whole litany of stuff that.
There's a lot of IRS stuff today.
Oh, yeah, I did try to do my taxes yesterday. I'm having to start over.
we tend to go into the past, like someone says, how are you? And well, I broke my leg last week, or, you know, again, focusing on the negative instead of the right here and now.
Yeah.
And what is that? What is, you know, it's not productive.
Well, it's not productive, but also it is reinforcing this idea that either getting what you want, it makes you either suffer or happy, or not want. So if you broke your leg, you're getting what you don't want. you know, and so it made you unhappy, so you're focusing on that. And you're also focusing on the idea that your state of mind is dependent on that. You know, whereas opposed to when you work with your mind and recognize that happiness is an internal matter, then it really doesn't matter what's happening out here. You may have concerns about, you know, loved ones and all of this stuff, but it's like, it doesn't have to really affect your peace of mind. This is kind of tricky because we don't buy it. We think that's not true. And this is the advantage of learning how to settle the mind. Because when you discipline yourself, what did Rinpoche say? If you commit to like, one example was if you commit to 12 sessions a day for 3 weeks, and then he cut back to 6, and then and he was talking about something that takes 2 seconds. So anyway, but the idea is that if you give it a shot, you know, if you say, okay, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes, you know, settling my mind, and not being attached to a result. You know, you just, that the commitment is to doing it, not how it goes. You know? So it's this, and then you check in. Do I, you know, how does that affect my day if I do that? You know? And so what I found from my experience is that it really can change the whole tone of every day. It's really weird because it doesn't seem like it should be that powerful. But we do know the mind, how powerful a mind is. And so if we allow our mind to just settle down and be more selective about what it chooses to look at, it just changes everything.
Yeah, well, I remember when he was talking about, you know, basically that notion that I shared with you a couple of weeks ago, you know, this year foolish monk, last year foolish monk, this year no change. He was basically saying, you know, a guy a monk practices, he's so devout, and he comes to his teacher and says, nothing's changing, I'm not better, I'm not feeling any better, I'm not any better. And Rinpoche said, you just keep practicing, you're still building merit.
Well, actually what he said is, you may need more merit.
Oh, I thought he said, as long as you keep practicing, you keep developing merit, that helps, because it helps crowd out everything.
Well, that's true.
Yes.
But it's, you know, he also was talking about how sometimes when you feel like you're doing everything right, you're doing all the practices your teacher suggested or the teaching suggests, you know, and that you're still not making any progress with your mind, it may be that you need to accumulate more merit. Because merit is positive energy. That's all it is. It's not something that you buy. It's just the positive energy we create when we do something with a positive motivation.
So I remember him saying, and again, please correct me if I misheard or misunderstood. I also thought he said that kind of like the antidote to that was devotion, like being more devout in your practice, like the quality of it rather than just doing it.
Yeah. So we're kind of all over the place this morning.
Sorry
about that. No, it's my fault. I'm not very because there were so many different little things that Rinpoche said that I just thought, oh, isn't that wonderful? So I'm just kind of all over the place. So, okay, let's give it some structure. Yeah, it's going to happen.
Well, it's Rinpoche's fault.
Yeah, let's blame Rinpoche. That doesn't create merit, I don't think. I don't think that's the direction we want to go. So one of the first topics, because we told him the topic was fear. I don't know exactly what we said to him, but it was fear. And so I'm looking at my notes now so that I can kind of stay in order. We're going to assume Rinpoche's more organized than I am. So, fear that becomes fuel for disturbing emotions being those negative states of mind that agitate our mind, you know, like anger, like greed, like jealousy, like pride. You know, these are inaccurate states of mind. because they distort the facts. And this disturbs our mind. So the fear that becomes the fuel for these states of mind is a kind of self-absorption and emotionally mishandling of the self or I. It's emotional chaos related to the self. That's a mouthful. So fear is like hopelessness. It sort of expresses a dead end. You know, sort of somehow we can't overcome whatever the fear is. And he said this energy can be transformed into the energy of fearlessness. Now that's pretty cool. Of course, hearing it does not make it so. And of course, when it's fearlessness, it becomes a strength. But this has something to do with the faith of conviction. You know, so like our fearlessness comes from our experience of putting the teachings into practice and discovering that they work and that they have validity and that they, you know, that the Buddha's description of how things exist is valid. And so all of our grasping at this or that perhaps is not. And then he said when fear is reactive, it becomes destructive. Yeah. So he said like this fear that has this this mishandling of the self. Part of that is the fear that is this kind of, you know, self-deprecation. You know, nobody likes me, nobody sees me even, nobody understands me, nobody pays attention to me. He says this, you know, he thinks comes from a lack of compassion and love. And this can come from, you know, your life, you know, that perhaps you weren't fortunate enough to have loving parents, you know, and so that you didn't have that kind of nurturing. So then, you know, but so what we need to do is do it now. You know, we need to have, you know, start with that loving kindness for ourselves. And so part of how that loving kindness can take a form is, you know, and if you're a Buddhist, you know, and you know, we have these, what I call bookends. So you start the day with a motivation, you know, setting a positive intention for your day, and then at the end of the day, you look back at your day and rejoice over what you did right and dedicate your merits, is basically what he was saying. So like so he said one thing that can be, why would that be a positive activity? Those of you who know a little bit about the jargon.
It's like,
Yeah, okay.
it's like you're putting it in your book, in your piggy bank.
What are you putting in?
The merit.
What is the merit?
The merit is the positive energy that you created throughout the day.
That you created. It is specifically looking at what you do well. So he said at first, you can literally just set a positive motivation. Rejoice that you just set a positive motivation and dedicate that. Because you dedicate your positive energy to others, to benefit others. So all three activities are about positive qualities of the self. You know, so even our motivation, if our motivation is about, you know, practicing our good qualities, you know, caring for others, wanting to help others, benefit others, all of those things are good qualities. And just putting it out there earns merit. It's a generation of positive energy. Just like when you get mad at someone and you're stomping around, is putting out a lot of negative energy. It's no different. So
the negative energy, say from someone who's fearful, like they get upset and they're fearful, that's bad karma? I mean, even though they're suffering, I guess is that?
No, I don't think that's, it's,
Okay.
you have to, I mean, I think you have to be more specific, you know, and not get caught up in that, but it's like the, you know, like beating up on yourself, telling yourself that you're terrible, judging yourself harshly, blah, 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 is in fact negative energy,
Okay.
you know? And it's harming you. And that counts. And the more we do that to ourselves, the less likely we'll ever be of real use to others. Because we sort of don't know how. We're practicing minds that are not helpful.
So negative energy is negative energy.
Negative
regardless
energy
if
is
it
negative
comes from-
energy because it leads to suffering. That's its
Okay,
definition.
Okay.
There's no like judge somewhere
Right.
going. It's just activities that lead to suffering are negative, activities that lead to happiness are positive, but understanding what those mean, what leading to happiness, what happiness actually is, and what suffering actually is. You know, it's like the mind of regret, where you regret harming someone, doesn't feel good, right? But it's a positive action because it's helping you resolve to not do that again. It's acknowledging that you've harmed someone. It's, then you're trying to, come up with a remedy for that, like an apology, and then you try to, not do it again. Those actions lead to happiness. Whereas regretting that you didn't, buy the lottery ticket that won $1 million is not so much. So. So this idea that if we would focus on the positive things we're doing, the positive body, speech, and mind, all three, whether it just starts with the mind or just starts with the speech, that we try to just say things that are encouraging or positive or not focused on the negative, that kind of thing, that's creating positive energy. So you rejoice about that and you dedicate that. So this habit, he said, he said, I want you to use this. So if you have this habit of a lot of negative self-talk and a lot of self-doubt and a lot of fear, then try to commit to do, this is what he said, try to commit to, generating a positive motivation, rejoicing that you did so, and dedicating that positive energy 12 times a day. And he says, so first, your commitment is all about quantity. Don't worry about quality. Just do it. And then, later on, we can get to the quality part. He said, but first you just have to do it. You have to, because you need to interrupt this habit of always focusing on the negative. And then he brought up, I'm about to jump around again. I'm going to have to restrain just a second. So this loving kindness towards the self sometimes is like self-compassion in the sense that it can be this removing of suffering. Like he said, even if, if you really are in danger, you're up that tree with that wild bison or whatever he was talking about. A part of that fear is this fear you're going to be hurt, and it's based on, a realistic danger, not something you're making up. And that's happening right now, that you are in danger right now. Allowing yourself to feel compassion for yourself, like, oh, gee, this is unfortunate. And having loving kindness that, that this is no fun. that kind of, if it drags on, like these poor guys stuck up in the tree, or one guy stuck in the tree, it's interesting, these experiences these monks had. If you have the habit of whatever difficulty you get into, your first thought is, well, stupid, what'd you expect? That's a problem for us. That is reinforcing that I don't have the capacity to transform my mind. I don't have the capacity to develop immeasurable compassion and loving kindness and all those things. Instead if we go, and have loving ooh, this doesn't feel so good, I'm sorry. That kind of just response like you do to a best friend, where they're having a difficult time and your first thought is to hug them. We need that mental hug. So we need to notice if we do that. And that can overcome fear. So this loving kindness can actually take away the fear. So you have to do some reflection on why that might be so. But a lot of our fear is rooted in the sense of aloneness. We have this false sense of separation from each other. We don't recognize, this is part of what our attachment and aversion does. It puts us all into, camps. Mine and yours, self and other. Instead of recognizing our common humanity and our common personhood, if we're talking about our pets, that we have shared values, shared needs, shared desire to be happy, the shared desire to not want to suffer, and that we're all struggling to do that. So we're in the same boat. So really, at the end of the day, if all you do is wake up in the morning and kind of go, okay, I'm going to focus on what's important to me today. So, I have to go to work, maybe you don't like your job, but you have to go to work, that's okay, you have to earn a living, but you think it, you put it in terms of, well, I have to have money in order to take care of my family, or to take care of my kids, or to travel in the, summertime, or whatever it is, so, I'm happy to do. So you don't focus on what's not important to you. You focus on what is important to you, and I want to be, I remember I have some, I'm going to spend this time with this friend and da-da-da-da-da, so I want to be present for them, that kind of thing. And then at the end of the day, you just look back and go, well, it was really pleasant, my interaction with these people, and I really did do, I lived up to, I set a motivation this morning, whatever it is, and then we rejoice about that. And we dedicate it, to reduce the suffering of others. And that kind of thing can really change our days, which adds up to better weeks, which adds up to better months, et cetera, et cetera. And at first, like Rinpoche was saying, it's quantity. You just have to do it. And then notice if it starts to shift something for you. So this being observant about yourself is so helpful. So to set a motivation, it's like, it's that same kind of thing that we do at the beginning here, where we just try to settle our minds for a moment, and then remember what's important to us, and set a motivation based on that. And you can even dedicate it to, to helping you to have that energy to follow through on whatever it is during the day, so that would benefit others. And then he talked about non-droves, and I just wanted to explain what those were. If people hadn't heard that phrase before, the 100,000 refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Non-drove. I've always heard it translated as preliminary. So, like, teachers often give a bunch of mantras, preliminaries, before someone does long retreat, for example. And so, like, you'll see books in our bookshop, they'll say, you know, like, the preliminary practice of prostrations, the preliminary practice of water bowls, or the preliminary practice of whatever. So you might get, you know, 100,000 water bowls, 100,000 refuge prayers, 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, 100,000 whatever. And this is supposed to help you remove the obstacles to successful, like, retreat, for example. But so what that's about is doing a practice to help transform your mind. Because if you do something that many times and you actually apply your mind to it, it can shift things for you. So this is, you know, so he said something about, like, he really believed in the power of saying the Mani mantra, which is the mantra of compassion, the Om Mani Padme Hum. So that, yeah, I love this thing. So mantra is, or reciting mantras is this idea that the sound itself becomes powerful due to the number of enlightened beings or practitioners who've said it over time. So just, it's sort of like a smile. You know, we associate a smile with welcoming, you know, that somebody's glad to see us, or that they, you know, they feel good, or whatever. I mean, that things are going well. So the smile has power all by itself. If someone does nothing but walk in and smile at you, it has an impact, because we know exactly, not really, but we think we know exactly what is meant by that smile. But, you know, we trust it. We trust it as being meaningful, you know, a positive thing, you know. So mantra has carried this, it carries this power from the virtuous minds of the people who've been reciting it. You know, so the Tibetans have a lot of confidence in the Mani mantra. They see His Holiness the Dalai Lama as the reincarnation, or the manifestation, is a better way to put that, a manifestation of the Buddha of compassion. So they had, you know, they put a lot of faith into this particular Buddha. So the Mani mantra, and also it's very easy to say. That has all its pluses for those of us who can't pronounce anything. You know, so by doing a practice, like if your mind is disturbed by loneliness or anger or anything, if you can turn your mind, or boredom, if you can turn your mind to reciting Om Mani Padme Hum as many times as you want to, that can shift the energy. Like, I know it's a habit that I've developed over time, where every time I hear a siren, that's what I do. It's just what I do. You know, it's just automatic now. It's just a habit I've developed. And when I was driving home from Parkland neighborhood the day that the shooting was occurring, I saw all those police cars and all those sirens. It was the first thing that I started to do. It just helps us settle our agitation somewhat. Because I guess partly, you know, I mean, they say there's the power in the mantra itself, but also there's the power in feeling like you're doing something. You know, you're trying to put out some positive energy in the world. Or you're just even that positive concern, the fact that you care what's happening to others. You know, so those things can help. Yeah.
Do these mantras have to be stated in Tibetan? Or can you use English translation of it?
They recommend it's actually Sanskrit, but they recommend the language it was originally done in. Like the Buddha said these mantras, so that's carrying some of the energy. I mean, it's not so that they, you know, because it's really not about the meaning. Like the Mani mantra means what? The jewel in the lotus? Something like that? You know, it's about the intention. It's about what you're thinking when you do it. You know, so it's that you want to do this in order to help relieve the suffering in the world, or that you want to do it because you recognize all the suffering in the world and you have compassion for others, that kind of thing. So it is, you know, they do recommend doing it in, because you really, I mean, it's rare that you'll find translations that make a whole lot of sense, partly because, now that I think of it, the compassion mantra is actually quite, there's a long one that probably has some, you know, if you know, you could put it in a paragraph like the Vajrasattva mantra. It's 100 syllables, so it has, you know, but the Jewel in the Lotus is a little bit terse, and it's hard to know what, but the Jewel in the Lotus, of course, is
Is there a
compassion.
choice of these that you can look at and evaluate which ones that you might want to do?
Yeah, where
So
are
where
they?
do you find them?
Where are these mantras? Where are they?
Well, there's in that prayer book.
It's in there?
Mhm. But usually your teacher gives them to you, yes.
When we're in a situation and we need to take that pause before we react, I
Yes.
find that saying this mantra really gives me the compassion not to act in a negative manner.
Yeah. How do you think that works?
Well, it stops, you have
Yeah.
the feeling, and it stops it, and I do have faith in the mantra itself.
So this, he said, this is what it's about. It's like kind of just developing. I mean, the faith can be that I have the faith in the teachings that say, good idea to pause before reacting. You know? And that this is a tool through which I can do that. You know? And then, you know, it can be that if you have a strong connection with compassion, if that's something that hooks you, then the Buddha of compassion might be a natural connection for you to make. The Tibetans have a really strong connection with Tara, in particular white Tara, which is that there. And so when they were living in Buxa, which was the concentration camp, not concentration camp, wrong word, the prisoner of war camp from World War II, it was a British prisoner of war camp. So the Indians allowed them to be refugees there when they first escaped Tibet. And my teacher from Australia was there, and he said that they were just terrified, you know. And so they did 21 praises to the Taras, kind of nonstop, to help settle their minds, because Tara relieves 8 fears. So, you know, so you have these, you know, so for the Tibetans, because they grow up with this kind of imagery, that, you know, they have, you know, they make connections. For us, it may be a bit different, although I've seen people have the same, you know, Westerners have the same kind of reaction. A lot of people have that towards Medicine Buddha. And I don't think it's the picture of Medicine Buddha. It could be, but it, you know, but I think also it's this idea of healing and helping people who are ill or impoverished or something, you know, so they just gravitate to that practice, or they hear the sound of the mantra, and for some reason it connects with them, you know, probably from past lives. So, you know, that's how it would be explained in Buddhism. So Rinpoche gave us the oral transmission of it.
Sorry, I was going to ask, does each imagery of the Buddhas contain like a different set of energy? Is it like...
No, I don't think it really, it's all enlightened energy, and it's not the image. The image just represents the fact that they're here. Yeah.
May I ask you this? How does Buddhism recognize the difference between caution and fear?
Well, they're just different states of mind. There's nothing wrong
Like
with
I may be caution of something because I have
knowledge that it could be dangerous.
knowledge that could be dangerous.
That's just wisdom.
I would love some. Just to recognize sometimes, you know, when I'm being cautious, or when I'm being cautious because I have fear. Or
Yes.
When I'm being cautious or fear, and then I'm cautious, you know.
Yeah,
this-
well, that's right. This is what we have to observe, and we can parse it out going, what is underneath this? If the caution is really about, I projected some illusion here about something that's making me fearful, so I'm proceeding with caution, you know, we might want to look at that, you know. and other times it may be, well, I've learned that, I need to be very careful as I proceed because I need to watch out for this or that because it's happened before.
I mean, I would think that I wouldn't wanna walk into a very bad neighborhood in the middle of the night, and that's not fear, that's just common sense, that, I'm putting myself in danger.
Yeah, so we don't have to nitpick these things. It's really about, this is, we kind of look and go, what's going on here? And is what I'm thinking that's going on here a rationalization for what's going on here? We really have to, we have to get to know ourselves really well and just look for the clues that, oh, I'm just rationalizing. There's no basis in fact. It's just I'm rationalizing because I really want this to happen, so I'm making it sound like a really good idea. And I'm making it sound like there are lots of good reasons why my idea should be the one that wins, because I just want it to happen. So I'm holding tight on that because I want it. So we want to know these things, because we're distorting the truth. It's not that it's such a really good idea. Every idea in the room might be a good idea, but I just want this idea to happen. So I'm greedy. So we just have to look. But we don't have to think that there's, what we're looking for is that underneath motivation. Is it all about me? That kind of thing. Because our self-interest distorts things. And the reason why self-interest is not the best driver of our actions is because it's not necessarily correct that self-interest will bring you happiness, because happiness isn't about what you get. So that's one of the belief systems we have, and that's what we have to try to overcome. It's this idea that I have to get my way in order to be happy. The idea that we have to get anything at all is part of the problem. Part of this distortion.
I'm sorry, I can't seem to shake this idea of, like in the fourth immeasurable, talking about free from the attachment for friends. Okay, I'll tell you, I was at the beach a month or two ago and I saw this picnic table and there was this family there that was 3 or 4 generations. And they were laughing, cajoling, and maybe that's only one side of that picture, but I couldn't help to feel that the sense of envy a little bit, to have a sense of belonging to something.
There's a difference between attachment and love. There's a difference between attachment and enjoyment. We can have that. So what happens is we think that we can just have, attachment is sort of like thinking, I have to be with these people in these circumstances in order to have a good time. And if I can't make that happen, those conditions come together to happen, I'm going to sulk because I'm going to be unhappy. That's where it distorts things. Whereas when we look at, oh, it's nice to hang out with a group of people that, get along, but my happiness doesn't depend on it. Yeah.
I was wondering if you, and this could offer him the definition of attachment according to Buddhist understanding, because I think it's different from the Western definition.
Oh, no, that's true.
And it really helped me
Yeah.
to understand attachment better and what was unhealthy attachment.
So tell us what attachment means, Darius. Isn't it funny how you can know the definition of something until someone asks? And it's like, I don't know, I'm not sure.
Is it exaggerating the good qualities of another?
Well, it's, yeah, sort of. Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. It's this idea of it's an exaggeration of the good qualities of an object. So an object of attachment is one in which you're exaggerating its good qualities. So you want to be near it. Okay? You don't want to be separated from it.
So that kind of helps with your idea, like when you were saying So it's like saying, I can only have those good times with this group of people I'm thinking is you exaggerated, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And also it's this kind of idea that somehow happiness comes from them. That's one of the things we are exaggerating. You know, it's like Venerable Rabina always like to use the example with chocolate cake, that you really honestly think there's a bottle of deliciousness in the recipe. You know, if you really like chocolate cake, you somehow think it is because of the chocolate cake. You know? The Buddha says, no, it's because you created the cause to have a pleasant experience, which happens to be manifesting as a piece of chocolate cake in that moment.
When you're saying happiness doesn't come from what you get, my understanding is it's what you give. So if you have an opportunity for service, whether it's with your family or with somebody else, the happiness can be.
No, I'm saying it's not even that tangible. See, this is all because we have this tendency, it's an internal thing. So whether you're being a condition for someone else to be able to give to you, or you're being, you know, a condition to be generous to someone else, both can bring happiness. Because it's a state of mind that you are happy when either occurs, because you're not invested in you.
Because I'm still dependent.
Well, we're all dependent. But it's this, instead of coming from the perspective of what's in it for me, you don't even go there. It's just not involved in the question. It's just not involved in your decision making. It's whatever the situation, however, whatever will be a benefit in whatever is arising in every moment. So it's really a very different, it's an internal process of being content, like with yourself, with, whatever is arising. It's it's having equanimity all the time. It's very hard to describe a mental state of mind. But we keep thinking that external objects or people are the source of it, as opposed to our mental habit. The way we respond as opposed to, and part of the problem is that we begin things with self-interest. We come from a place of believing that the self is the center of the universe, or at least our universe, and that's got to dictate everything around it. And that grasping it as self separates us from everybody else. It puts this artificial separation as if somehow, what's, I don't even know how to describe, but we're putting this separation. I'm sure we all would define that separation differently. When actually we're all on the same boat. We have karmic connections with the people around us. Somebody had their hand up. I'm just rambling on, trying to remember who it was. Joy, did you have?
No, it was just like, I think it's just what you're saying. It's the way you perceive something. You see those people and you're envious, but instead you could perceive it and say, oh, how great. It makes me happy.
It makes me happy to see them so happy. Yes.
To turn it around.
Yeah.
But I think that's...
Yeah, that's right. That's part of it too. It's so, one is exaggerating, if we're, the attachment comes in when we're when we make it the end all and be all, like I can't be happy unless those kinds of things are happening for me.
I just think of, having a strong background in philosophy, I struggle, but I think of all the writers, the philosophers who are brilliant people who face this dilemma, end up going insane or committing suicide. It's like...
Yes, they're not doing something right. So, that you've got to take that into account. If your practice and your belief system is leaving you in despair, something's not working. Time to abandon that path. It's something's wrong there. It's just sort of like, we can even get hooked by this idea the purpose of life is to be happy. What does that mean, So we have to be wary of all hooks, anything that's hooking us, because for one thing, it's this goal thing, that it's always out there somewhere in the future, as opposed to what's happening now. Am I content now? Is anything, is the house burning down around me? Like Rinpoche, the earthquake. So we can go to all kinds of extremes. Like the Buddha said, things don't exist the way they appear. A lot of people take that, not people, I'm just talking generically. It's possible to take that to the extreme of thinking nothing exists. And I don't quite know what you do with that. But, you can also take it, others take things, oh, that can't be right. The Buddha's totally wrong. So that means everything exists, permanently. And the Buddha said neither one of those extremes are correct. You need to find that middle ground. Nothing that the Buddha taught denies conventional reality. It just says that the way that we think things appear to us is faulty. So it's the same way of, as soon as we grasp at the self, we start to see everybody else as sort of like other, and they're not compatible. Yeah.
So is that like, there's like a book, something about the middle way? That's what that means? It's not the either extreme?
Right.
That's what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, so that's what the middle way is getting at. Yeah. So it's the middle way between nihilism and they can't decide on a good phrase for the other extreme, eternalism or that kind of thing. So but again, it's not that friends are not something to be enjoyed, but we want to understand the relativeness of the term friend. That our friends are somebody else's enemies. There are a lot of people strangers. All of our friends were strangers once. Sometimes our friends become enemies. Sometimes our enemies become our friends. This is very fluid. So this idea that my friends are better than your friends gets a little ludicrous. And yet we have whole nations based on that. And this gets us into trouble. We fight wars because of this. We do harm because of this. Because of seeing everything in terms of separations, divisions, as opposed to we're all in the same boat. And so I'm going to be happy that you have friends, and that you enjoy your friends, but it's but knowing that you're, that that isn't the source of happiness. It's really your mind. So like one of the things you can look at is what's your mind like when you're with friends, and can you carry that over to strangers? Can you recognize that your enemies have friends? That these labels have nothing to do with that object. It has to do with your relationship with that object. And those relationships change. So the more we can kind of loosen that hold, first of all, the more opportunities we have for friends, which is always a good thing. But also this, the more we can separate the idea that our happiness is outside of us or our suffering is outside of us, that someone's doing something to us, and understand that we have a choice in the way we respond, that gives us a condition that will help us reduce suffering and increase our happiness. And sometimes it's sort of, if we just reduce our holding on to the suffering, we'll find that there's some happiness already there. It's being obscured by our habit energy of holding on to the negative. It's hard. So,
Can I ask a question? How does Buddhism see extremes? Like as a soul path, sometimes we go from one extreme to another to
As a what?
extremes.
Yeah.
As a soul path, as an eternal soul being. with
Okay, well, we don't really have soul beings, so that's why that confuses me. So, like on your spiritual path,
Right.
Okay.
On your spiritual path, which is a metaphor.
yeah, what I'm used to.
Right. Like, how does Buddhism recognize extremes? Like going from one extremes, like I'm only happy if I have this, and then you didn't find happiness there, and then I'm only happy if I have that, and then you learn from both experiences. And
You may learn from both experiences, but the attachment is of thinking that that is it. Is part of how we think, this confusion about how things exist.
Right, at that point in time, but then as an experience, for the experience.
We can make every experience we have an opportunity to get closer to happiness.
Right, and then you find like a more neutral, not neutral, but a way of not being attached. Like, for example, I'm in pain right now. Years ago, I would be very miserable because I'm in pain. Today, I'm not happy that I have pain, but I'm very happy.
Right, exactly.
You know?
This is part of that work. It's just recognizing that it isn't what's happening to us that is the issue, it's how we respond. You know? And it sounds like just a game, but actually we play mind games constantly. That's what our rationalizations are. It's just another mind game. It's just like, oh, let me convince myself that I'm right. You know? That's my personal favorite. But it's this, you know, recognizing that how we think matters. Our habits of our patterns of the way we think matters. Not only matters to whether we add suffering onto difficult situations, but it also matters in how we treat others. And you know, so it's in how we view the world. It's not we put a lot of importance onto everything else. You know, how much money you make, so that how many games can you play, how many vacations can you take, how many, I don't know, how many houses you can own, how many, you know, I don't know, outfits, how many pairs of shoes for those women who like to buy shoes, you know, Melda Marcus or whatever. But you know, I mean, this is, you know, it's like this insistence that it's the accumulation of stuff that's going to matter. It puts us completely on the wrong track. You know, so and that is just another type of external thing. And it's also external to say, I'm only going to be happy if people treat me well. That's an external thing. You know, maybe the way people treat you reflects, you know, your past action. No. But also just knowing that that does not have to determine how, you know, how you are. And you can have compassion for yourself when things don't go well. Because most of the time things don't go well.
Oh, yeah.
You know. Especially if we look at our aging bodies. So we dwell on that. But that it's entirely possible to be happy in very, very challenging situations, the ones that we can't imagine being happy in. There are happy people in them right now. And it doesn't make sense to us because we keep, you know, it's because of this belief that it not only does it matter, it absolutely matters. It must happen this way in order for me to be at peace. And the Buddha said, we've got it upside down and backwards. I'm sure he didn't use those words. Those are mine. So, anyway. All right. So working with our fear, working with our suffering, you know, is a lot of which is just, you know, if we wake up with an attitude problem, we can just kind of pause and go, okay, I've woken up and I'm not, I'm kind of cranky already. I've been awake for 3 minutes. I want to know this, so that, because this could influence my day if I let it, so, let's try to shake it off, or take a walk around the block, take a, hot shower, or cold shower, whatever it is you need. But it's just, it's a way of just acknowledging, oh, this is a condition for me to make myself miserable. So maybe I will, not give it this, not grasp after it and see it as so important, and just let it not have any power over me today. Because if we feed it, it will stick around. So what's up, Miss Director?
My announcements, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, let me pull up my lucky blue reminder here. The new Discovering Buddhism module.
Yes, we start Discovering Buddhism on the Spiritual Teacher on Thursdays. It's a short module because Venerable Rubino's coming the last week of April, I think, the last full week of April. So it's just like 3 Thursdays, but it's on the Spiritual Teacher and how that, why that's considered so important in Tibetan Buddhism.
And then it goes into Venerable Rubina and her visit. And also, too, I just wanted to remind people about our classes and our fees, our suggested donations, as they are just suggested donations, and we appreciate if you can make the donations for Venerable Rubina for the whole week she's here, because she's teaching Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday the Guru Puja, Thursday night, and then Saturday and Sunday full days. However, if you cannot afford the full suggested donation, please just make a small donation of a couple dollars or whatever you can afford, so you do not miss this wonderful opportunity.
And even try, if you've never seen Venerable Rubina lead a Guru Puja, it's worth it. So, because she has devotion to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and it's really nice to be in the presence of students, it's just nice. I can't describe it any other way. So, and she has a lovely voice.
And now there's 2 pujas that week. Is she leading both of them?
No, because she's not here on that Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, please do not miss this wonderful opportunity for her. Also, today after class, as every first Sunday of the month, we have our little bring your own lunch, and so we can eat together. And also as an opportunity to ask Venerable Tenderin any questions.
And if you're new and you want to stick around and just, ask those, bizarre questions that never seem to come up in class, please do. Like, why do you shave your head, and why is there a lot of yellow, blue, and red and green in the room, and all that kind of stuff. So whatever. Just whatever. So please stick around for that and share some lunch with us.
Yeah, and that's really, other than our question jar too, we're just reminding people over there we have a question jar if you have any.
And then someone's job's going to have to be to open the question jar and bring the questions to me, because I just noticed there's a question in there, and I had, I don't have that habit yet.
And that's from last week.
I apologize. So, not that there's a deadline. So, anyway, so stick around if you're of the mind to. And then on 2 weeks from today, we'll have a meditation before class, just a 30-minute meditation from 10:15 till 11:15. And no, we won't, because that's Medicine Buddha Puja.
No, you're right. 3 weeks or 2 weeks from today is the meditation, and then the next one is the Medicine Buddha. So the 15th is the meditation at 10:15, and the 22nd is the Medicine Buddha Puja.
Okay. There you go. All right. So now, so we've, spent this time together talking about, our mind, our emotions. How can we use our mind to our advantage as opposed to our disadvantage, and use our thoughts to our advantage, and try to figure out, maybe other alternatives to handling fear or different things. So, any effort we make on trying to direct our minds in more positive directions is good for the world. So, this is putting positive merit out there, positive energy. So we want to dedicate that to be a benefit to others. So let's recite the dedication on page 246. So take a moment to think about your own positive things today, your own positive actions, your open-mindedness, your search for spiritual knowledge, whatever. And be happy about that. Think how wonderful that is. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored in finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world. And so, like on Easter, it's particularly cool to think about these kinds of things, because to think that, what year is it? Okay, so 2018 years ago. But, today it's what? What do Christians celebrate? Jesus, what?
Rose from the dead.
Resurrection.
But why did he, die? For the sins of everyone else. How amazing is that? To, whether, correct or not, the thought that was his intention was to allow what was happening happen, just, to purify the negative actions of everybody else. That's really quite the Bodhisattva ideal. So, very cool. Just leave you with that thought. So, anyway.
Thank you.